Live right now. Let me just get going on the Facebook and then we'll be set. All right. Awesome. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, Twitch, and YouTube. We have a special guest with us today, Mikael Luman, on how to heal yourself. This is going to be a really exciting show. I'm really looking forward to it. So let me just read our intro script real quick. Welcome to the News4Us World's all new Fringe Division podcast. This is episode 2. This is one of the things I've been wanting to do for a while, where we talk about subjects such as higher consciousness, NDEs, et cetera, all those topics that some may consider to be fringe. So don't forget to subscribe to all our channels and pages on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble, as well as our other pages, channels, such as News4Us World, where is Delilah, Heatherly Warriors, and the Box Podcast, which is going to be premiering next week sometime. All the links are in the description. And if you like our work and support our efforts, don't forget to check out the Sacred Lavisa Bonfire store for t-shirts, water bottles, coffee cups, and more. www.bonfire.com/fu-family-court/. And with that being said, let's begin. So why don't you tell our viewers, for those who haven't heard your story yet, Mikael, your how this all started for you, and especially that rock story. I thought that was quite fascinating. So go ahead and begin, and then what we'll do is we'll segue into them asking you some questions, and then we'll after that we'll segue into how healing yourself and how that ties into having the perceptual awareness to actively create your reality, and and how that ties into that. So go ahead.
All right. So in 2015, I had just had a back surgery. I had an 8.5 millimeter protrusion in L4, L5 in my back. I'd been in pain for 2.5 years. I reherniated the same disc about 3 weeks later, only to find out that I had torn labrums and bilateral impingements in both hips. So in a moment of feeling if I was out of options, I went out of town. I hiked up to the Deschutes River. I put all my pain in a rock, threw the rock in the river, and healed instantly, or had an instant healing experience. Like one moment I had these things, the next moment I didn't. The day before, I tried to take my kids paddleboarding, and I couldn't even stand up on a paddleboard. I drove back to Portland and I paddleboarded across the Columbia River and back. Like that's how instant the change was. But the most amazing thing that happened through that experience was not that I just had a physical healing experience, but my reality shifted, or my perception shifted. Because one moment when I looked back, I saw all the things I wanted to change in my life. The next moment, I didn't want to change anything. Right? But the moment that I put the pain in the rock was the moment I realized that the rock didn't take the pain. That I was actually the one letting go of the pain. And the pain's really all accounted for anyway.
So question now, basically what you're describing with the whole rock experience is you put all, you basically were in extreme excruciating pain, obviously. And then I would assume you reached a point consciously where you put all your intent of that pain and into that rock and was able to let it go as a result. So basically you're talking about healing through intent, correct?
Well, in the moment I was healing through feeling as if I was out of options, basically.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense, because that's what I was thinking, that one would have to get to that point on a conscious level to be able to let go and achieve that result. But that makes perfect sense to me.
Well, so up until that point, I always had like a doctor's appointment to look forward to. Like I've already had 7 right knee surgeries, 2 left knee surgeries, 2 broken ankles, a torn quad, 2 torn hamstrings, all this stuff, right? But I was still stuck in that perception of what needed to happen in order for me to heal. And all of a sudden the time frames didn't match up, because the back surgeon wanted me to do my hips first, the hip surgeon wanted me to do my back first, and then get into shape for 6 months to a year. So really I was at the point of being out of options. Now, I had already started to previously know that there was more to it than just sports. right? Like after about my 6th knee surgery on my right knee and my first one on my left, I was like, well, there's plenty of people that play sports that aren't having this many surgeries. So it's not just sports. So I started to understand like frequencies and vibration and harmony and disharmony, but I really wasn't willing to utilize it in my life. I was even making patches for athletes for performance that were just programmed with certain frequencies. But really, I thought healing was for everybody else because my life, I thought wasn't going the way that I wanted it to. So I chose to take everybody else's stuff. So the result of me taking everybody else's stuff was me in more disharmony or me out of balance, right? So the rock is what allowed me to let it go without giving it back to whoever I took it from.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. I see where you're going with that. Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Really, the most amazing thing that happened through that experience wasn't just the healing, but that everything shifted. Like before, I didn't think I had purpose anymore because I didn't think I was capable of doing all the things that I wanted to do with my life. The next moment, I saw my past experiences as an example of possibility for people. So my healing experience allowed me to fulfill my purpose and to start helping people. Whereas the moment before, I wasn't helping anybody, even though I thought I was helping people.
Okay. Yeah, it's amazing how one comes to that perceptual awareness, because like I know from my own higher consciousness experience that I had when I was in high school, one of the things that I learned from that is that everything's connected, but more importantly, we create our own reality based on our beliefs and our perceptions of the world around us. And once you realize that perception, the way you perceive any given situation is a choice, you can consciously and proactively begin to affect change and become an active participant in creating your reality. And that's one of the things that I learned from that experience, from my perspective. And I think it almost ties in perfectly with what you're talking about.
Well, I believe everything is a choice.
It truly is.
Either we have no choices or we always have choices.
Right.
So if I can heal, anybody can heal because I know my story. I know all the things that I've done. Like I spent 10 years addicted to drugs and alcohol, 2 years in prison. I've been clean for 20 now, right? But like all the things that I have experienced in my life are what prevented me from healing. When really all the things that I have experienced in my life are what allow me to help others to have a healing experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because all my experiences are meaningful.
Right. They all are part of what make you who you are. And
without one of them, I wouldn't have been in a position to have that experience.
Right. No, totally. I totally agree with you on that. There's no, I don't have any regrets because I would not be the man that I am today if I would have not have gone through what I went through and to get to this point,
And that's kind of how completely the shift was, because the moment before, when I looked back, I saw all the things I wanted to change. I saw all the things I missed out on. I wish I would have gone to college and played sports. I wish I wouldn't have been going through a divorce. All this stuff that I wish I could have changed. The next moment, I didn't want to change anything. The experiences were all the same. My perception shifted, but also my perception to almost everything shifted. Because one moment, even though I thought I believed in unlimited possibilities, the next moment I actually knew all things were possible. And then I started participating in some pretty crazy possibilities. Like I was able to charge my cell phone in my hand. I was able to bend a spoon. I was able to do and participate in all this crazy stuff. But what it really did was allowed me to help other people have greater experiences. Because once you start to know what's possible, then there really are no limits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had, that's the irony of the way that you said that about realizing that well, I have a okay, so like that anything is possible. I have a quote that I came up with, and it's, once you realize perception is a choice anything becomes possible.
Yeah.
And like I kind of came up with that from my own personal experience, but you're absolutely right on that. Anything is possible because it's all comes down to our beliefs and our expectations of what we expect, and what we're programmed through our upbringing and our schooling to think about how reality works. But the reality is, what we're finding is that we actually, in effect, create our reality through our expectations, beliefs, and perceptions.
Yeah. And I think that we are transitioning from a time where it used to be believing was enough. Now you have to know.
Right. Definitely.
Because there's so many beliefs out there that who knows what the truth is. Once you know the truth, then the beliefs don't even matter anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's that knowing. I know in my experience, I've always got that knowing from my intuition and my gut. From your own experience, would you say that's where your knowing primarily comes from, or how would you describe it from your perspective?
Well, I would maybe describe it that believing and thinking is in the head. Knowing is in the heart. When you know something, you're not thinking about it. Right? If you know that you're better, you just go out and do better things. You don't think about doing better things. Right? I see everybody as already perfected. When I'm having a healing experience with somebody, I'm just holding that space of perfection until they realize how perfect they are. But
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I think that's great, because you're absolutely right. Everybody's on their path, and like you said before with you, you had all these regrets, and then you realized that you didn't need to have those regrets, because you realized that everything happened for that reason, and you wouldn't be where you are today without those experiences. And I think that ties right into how other people, like what you said about helping other people get to that point, and how they're on their own path, but they're having those realizations and those experiences, which are causing them to dig deeper internally and start to do that work, internal work.
Yeah. And once I experienced healing instantly, I knew that it was possible. I could have, if I would have gone back to being who I was before, my healing experience might not have lasted. But since I chose to then go out and share my experience with others, every time I have a healing experience with somebody else, it reinforces my experience. So I know that it happened that way. Because looking back now, if I look back to 2015, there are times when I might question that, oh, well, maybe I wasn't that bad. Maybe I wasn't in that much pain. Maybe I'm making it all up, right? But I've had a blind woman whose vision's come back. I had another woman who's been in a wheelchair for 11 years that just got up and walked. Like crazy stuff. Right? But it just reinforces my own personal experience that, yes, I had a healing experience, and that other people can have healing experiences too. And that we really are much better than we think that we are. Like we have all already been perfected. It's just up to us to choose how much perfection we want to participate in.
Right. Oh yeah, no, you're right. And that's awesome, because that actually is a good valid point there you make, because it is a choice. When we stop having that self-doubt, or stop living in fear, and stop living in that false confusion that we create for ourselves by our expectations and beliefs, we can break out of that, out of those internal chains. I think that's a beautiful way that you put that. That was awesome. That I think that hit the nail right on the head, and it was a valid point that needed to be made too.
Well, and also right in the beginning, I knew I had an instant healing experience, but I still wanted validation for an experience that I just had. So I immersed myself, let's say, in the energy world, because I was trying to figure out something I had just experienced. But most of the people that I came across hadn't had the same experience I had. So right in the beginning, I thought I needed to do all this stuff with people in order for them to have an experience. Whereas now I know that I don't have to do anything other than just be the example of possibility.
Okay.
Or I don't have to change anything in anybody, because everybody's already perfect. They just don't realize how perfect they are. So like the first woman that I had a major experience with, she couldn't lift her arms above right here.
Okay.
And so I went back in time and I changed stuff when she was 3, and then I changed stuff when she was 5, and then changed stuff when she was 9. And then when I got to 15, her arms started working. But I realized right away that it really wasn't what I was doing. It was just I was creating enough amplitude in the experience so that whatever the fear was that was preventing her arms from working got transmuted to love.
Okay.
Or peace or joy or whatever you want to call that, unconditional love, that higher
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, because you're absolutely right. Like the fear mindset is crippling. It prevents people from growing or working through stuff internally. And it's when they start to let go of that and turn that into something positive, like love, for example, which is it's just universal love in general, or just that love vibration. That's key, because when you raise yourself to that level, to that frequency, you can overcome pretty much anything.
Yes, and if we're not all in this experience on our own. Like if we were meant to be on our own, we would all have our own little planet somewhere and would just be doing it on our own, right? Like to participate in somebody else's healing experience is one of the greatest experiences.
It truly is. I mean, and to help, to like being of service to others, I noticed for me is something that it's really one of the things that I it's why I keep doing what I do. I mean, it's very fulfilling to have people come back and validate one's work and say, hey, thank you, and so that's another aspect of that as well.
And it's really simple, because once I realized that I didn't need to change people, or I didn't need to find out what was wrong with people, or all that stuff. Like Western medicine wants to tell people what's wrong with them. All the other medicine out there these days is kind of the same, like trying to point out what's wrong so that you can figure out what's right. When once you realize that everything is already right, it's just their perception is that there's something wrong. It's easy to get it to shift. Right?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
like, I had a woman that couldn't eat food. She was 60 years old and hadn't eaten food for like 55 years. I focused on her. I told her, go make something you haven't been able to eat in the past. She made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She took a bite and realized her stomach was better. Her stomach was better 5 minutes before she took the bite. It just took her 5 minutes to realize that her stomach was better. Had she not taken the bite, she might not have ever realized that her stomach was better.
You're right. You're absolutely right. See, that's a perfect example of how your past experiences tie into your current state of awareness.
But also, time isn't a constant. Like each moment is its own moment to be whatever we create it to be. So if this is the last moment and this is the next moment, what connects those two moments is perfection. Or if this is the particle and this is the wave and this is the particle, like when we are in the wave, we are in perfection. The more we participate in that space, the greater experiences that we have.
Nice.
Right?
No, absolutely.
It also means that we have unlimited second chances. Like we don't have to wait till tomorrow morning. We don't have to wait till the first of the month, the first of the year. Every moment is a second chance. And that's really all that healing is. That's really all that I'm doing with people is I'm showing them, regardless of what has happened up to this point, each moment you have the opportunity to step into more perfection. The more we let go of, the greater experiences that we can have.
Yeah, no, and I've absolutely had that validation in my own experience, like as I've been doing, as I'm becoming more and more self-aware and self-conscious, and and come to that realization of, because like that was the whole perception thing was something I learned early on, but like it hasn't been until like recently that it's really come into full bloom, where I've been able to really start consciously utilizing my conscious awareness of how I want to get point my perception, how I want to choose to receive things. Because I mean, there's so much. I mean, once you realize that, and then you start to actively work on it and think, oh, every situation, okay, am I going to let this bother me, affect me, and in a negative way by dwelling on it, or am I going to let it go and move on and start focusing on the positive aspects of things that I have in my life, and that's part of that process. But once you become consciously aware that you can do that, then it's like, oh, it's quite the revelation, you know?
Yeah. And for me, it's easier for me to help myself helping other people than it is to sit around and try and help myself.
Right. No, for me, it's like I'm the same way. I really I love doing what I do, and I don't do it for money or fame. I do it because I love the work that I do, and I love to help people, you know, and that's why I do what I do, you know.
Yeah. Because we know all our stories. So it's easier for if healing, all that it takes for a healing experience is to get out of your head and into your heart. If I'm helping you have an experience, I'm getting out of my head and into my heart. I can sometimes do it easier for you than I can for me. And again, because I know all my stories. I know what I did yesterday. I know what I did last year. I know what I did the last 20 years, right? So, but I have enough compassion and enough empathy from my past experiences to know that if you say that you have a headache, that is enough for me. I know that you don't need to have a headache. I just hold that space for people until they know that they don't have a headache anymore.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. You hold that space for them until they had that realization themselves as a result.
Right. Right. So if somebody says to me, I can't walk up and down the stairs, that's the truth. I already know that they can. Whether you want to use the quantum model where all possibilities exist in the quantum field, or the Christ model where he's already accounted for all of it. So we all are perfect already, right? I just hold that space. And then I point out to them that here, walk up and down the stairs. They don't have to know it until they do it. But as soon as they do it, they better know that they just did it. So if somebody says, I can't walk up and down the stairs, one step might not be enough for their perspective to change or their perception to change. 2 steps might not be enough. If I get them to walk 10 steps, that usually is enough for them not to sit back down.
Right.
Right? Because the moment is greater than all the past experiences. And when the moment is great enough, we forget or our perception changes about what has happened.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense, because like when you do live in that moment, you stop focusing on the past, you know, experiences you've had that have hindered you, you know, and you start focusing on the here and the now. Yeah, that's critical. That's definitely a critical aspect, I think.
Well, and healing is probably all just about a perception of time, right? If I'm in this moment and I'm looking back and all I see is these last moments in time, unless I can create an experience in the moment that is greater than all of those, I will still see all of those. But just like if we use my healing experience as an example, in the moment before I looked back, all I could see is all the things I wanted to change. The past was more real than the present moment.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But as soon as that moment became greater than the past, that experience was the greatest of experiences. And then the past no longer mattered. That moment separated me from all the past experiences.
You were able to let go of all the past experiences as a result of that, weren't you?
Yes. And when I help people, I reinforce that same experience over and over again. And I know how great of experiences that we can have.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's that reinforcement of having those experiences, and then again and again, that really, I think, really helps propel people's conscious awareness. Like it really jumpstarts it. I think once they start having those same kind of experiences repetitively, it reinforces all that. It's like, oh, okay, this I can do this. I can do that. You know.
Yeah. Well, just like the person that said, oh, I can't eat food, right? That's the truth. But then when I have them eat a sandwich and then they can eat the sandwich, there's 2 stories that they can hold on to. They can hold on to the one where they can't eat, or if the experience is great enough, why would they go back to the old story?
Comes down to the choice, perception of our
Right.
choice of
So
perception.
2.5 years later, she's still eating food, right? Because she chooses to eat now. Whereas before she chose not to eat because she thought that her stomach was bad.
Right. And it was all based on a belief.
Right. And 55 years of building on that belief over
Yep.
and over again. right? I would say that, well, a majority of our illness is based off of our perception of being, or I don't know how to explain it. I'm highly empathic.
I am as well, actually.
I operated very sympathically for 40 some years. I took everything on thinking that it was me. Whether it was mine or anybody else, it doesn't really matter. I created all the disharmony by the way that I interfaced. I wanted people to change so badly that I was willing to participate on that level.
Okay.
But like the third or fourth person that I helped had a sty in their eye. And I was still at the point where I didn't want to be wrong, right? And I was so willing to get it out of their eye that I put it in my eye. So I learned rather quickly that it has nothing to do with me, that I'm just providing the space for a greater experience, but I'm not trying to take somebody's sty.
Right.
I just know that they don't need it. And I'm just holding that knowing until they know that they don't need it. Healing probably always happens instantly. It sometimes takes us time to grasp that something has shifted. Like, one of the reasons I know this is because if I have, let's say, 10 people that have pain, and I focus on all 10, 3 might say, I feel warmth and tingling. 3 might say, I felt a cool sensation. 3 might say, I felt my chakras open up and my aura clear up. And 1 might say, I didn't feel anything. But the end result is usually all the same. They have a greater experience. So I know that everything that they feel is actually after the experience. Like, if your perception is that it needs to feel warmth or tingly for you to grasp that it's already shifted, then that's usually what people will feel.
Like, that's their expectation.
Right. Or their perception, or what they think needs to happen, when the healing is always instant. That's them trying to grasp that something instantly changed. Right. So like, one moment I had torn labrums in my hip. The next moment I didn't. They didn't heal over time. They just were healed the next moment, because everything that was associated with torn labrums was no longer present. So if energetically, let's say, you're working backwards in time still, you're trying to move energy to change the information. What I do with people is I just know that they're perfected and hold that knowing, so that then the energy does something different. But when you shift the information, that's when things are complete or permanent or real. Because it's no longer a healing process, it's a healed experience. Like, I had torn labrums and then I didn't.
So yeah, by experience, I mean, as in past tense, like it's already happened. Therefore, your perceptual awareness of it becomes that, and then it becomes a solid knowing because of that experience, so to speak, right?
Yes. Yeah. And
Nice.
It's really not that complicated. Healing has become extremely complicated, and it really doesn't need to be that complicated, because as soon as you can grasp that time isn't a constant, that means that it doesn't matter what just happened.
Right.
You can have a greater experience. So if somebody steps off the sidewalk and twists their ankle, it's sometimes difficult for them to have that greater experience right then, because they just twisted their ankle.
Right.
But the next moment, it can be a not twisted ankle, as long as they're willing to let go of stepping off the sidewalk and twisting their ankle. Most people will be mad at themselves for twisting their ankle.
Right.
It might take them a little
I know
time.
I've been mad at myself twisting my ankle before, so I know what that's like. Believe me, I've been there.
Or stubbing
You're
your toe,
absolutely right. Yeah.
or doing anything. Right in the moment, it's hard to realize that the next moment is a different moment. Just like if somebody didn't sleep last night, they should be able to have just as much energy this moment as they did in other moments. The thing is if we hold ourselves accountable for not sleeping last night, it's sometimes hard to get into that space. No different than if you could take one step, you should be able to take 50,000 steps, 100,000 steps, unlimited steps. as long as you don't stack steps on steps on steps. Because we're really good at saying, oh, well, look how far I've gone. But as soon as we start saying, look how far I've gone, we're attaching all the time, all the steps. Right? 3 years ago, I just decided I was going to run a half marathon and didn't train and went out and did it. I was fine. As soon as I chose to start running again was when it took a little bit more effort, because then I really cared about my experience. So I held on to things more so than others.
Right. Hey, so would you, I know these ladies are just itching to ask you questions. Would you like to go ahead and, Jen's got a little passage she'd like to read from her, this little book. And would you read the title and then go ahead and read that little short 2 pages for us before we segue into your guys' questions?
Sure. This is called Daily Rituals right here. And I'll have to hold it down because the lighting, it was really bright and it looks like it might storm. So I got to hold it down just a little bit. And it says, I can heal myself. We are the creators of our world, and therefore we create negative or positive influence that affect it. Sickness in the body or mind is a cry for help and a desperate need for change. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you feeding your body with a plant-based nutrient and exercise daily? Do you love yourself? Are you taking time for yourself to meditate and recharge? A physical illness is the result of an internal and emotional problem. If we concentrate on healing our mind and thoughts, we will heal ourselves and educate others to heal the world around us. And it says something about exercise. Physical pain is a result of an emotional blockage or unhealthy diet. There are 2 main causes for illness and disease. It is so important to ensure that you have healed yourself, your mind, and your past to be able to move forward. If you are dealing with a sickness, figure out how and why this sickness occurred. Look to a metaphysical realms and research understanding. What is it that you are fearful of? Have you released your emotional pain from the past? Seek natural medicines and alternative therapies. Follow a plant-based diet and meditate often. It is important to educate yourself both emotionally and physically as to why the illness has occurred in order for you to heal yourself. And then journal. Write down where you are feeling pain. Then try to remember any other times you have felt this pain before. Refer to family members, how they experience a similar pain that you are going through. Envision the pain and answer the questions. What color is the pain? What size is the pain? If you were to identify the pain with an emotion, what would it be? Try to recall an incident that occurred when you felt that emotion. Write it down, acknowledge and accept the pain from that emotion, release and let go. It's time to move on.
Nice. That was beautiful, Jen. Thank you for sharing. So, what did you think of that, Michael? That was pretty spot on with what you're saying, I think.
Well, and I would even say, well, let me think here for a sec.
Uh-huh.
All of that doesn't necessarily even matter. People want to have a greater experience.
Mm.
Like the woman that couldn't eat food, we didn't look for all the reasons. I just showed her she could eat. And then moving forward, then she had all this new space to do whatever it is that she chose to do. So we didn't heal her gut. We didn't put her on supplements. We didn't change her diet. I just showed her that she could eat. Then moving forward, she got to choose what she ate, how much she ate, when she ate, all that kind of stuff. Second chances don't really care about what has already happened.
Right.
Miracles don't really care about what's happened. But moving forward, then we better choose the things that align best with our level of awareness. So if you think that you need to eat, let's say, fruits and vegetables, then moving forward, you better eat fruits and vegetables. If you think you need to take a supplement for your gut, then yes, you better do that. But miracles don't care. Second chances don't care. That's why it's sometimes easier for me to participate with somebody else in their healing experience, because then we can get out of all that stuff that we think that we need to do, because we really don't have to do anything other than just allow the greater experience.
So basically, you're saying basically we can bypass all those other steps that may not necessarily even be necessary because we don't need to. You're providing the conduit to help people realize right then and there, and bypassing all those little steps. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, isn't it?
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting. Sometimes it becomes more complicated to look for all the reasons. If the reasons pop up, then great, look at it then.
Right.
But to go looking for all the reasons to be healthy is probably
going to be more counterproductive, I think, right?
It can be.
And I think it might also be a lot harder, and it might also be somewhat of a roadblock, because you have to think, whoa, okay.
It can become a roadblock, because if you start pointing out all the things that are wrong with people and they start looking at that list of things and they're like, well, I can't change all of that. Right? That's why I've kind of shifted the way that I do things. I don't point out to people that anything's wrong, because I see people as already perfect. I just hold that perfection. Whatever that perfection is, I'm not even assuming I know what perfect is for somebody. I just know that everybody's already perfected. And then it's up to us to step into more of that perfection. And then once we have our second chance, then we get to choose. The reason we're unhealthy is because we think we're out of choices. When you provide enough space for someone that they can all of a sudden see the choices again, then they get to choose what they want to do moving forward.
It's giving them their power back.
Right. Like if somebody says, I can't walk up and down the stairs, they don't think they have a choice to walk up and down the stairs. If I can show them that here, you can walk up and down the stairs, then they get to choose. Right? I did have somebody say to me something one time about, well, I know, but you don't address the emotional aspect of healing. And I would say that I do, because if I get out of my head and into my heart, and if the heart represents unconditional love will change whatever the emotional component is.
Because you're already working from a heart space.
Yes, to unconditional love. So if somebody's depressed and that's why they can't walk up and down the stairs, when they walk up and down the stairs, they're no longer depressed. If somebody's afraid because they can't walk up and down the stairs, as soon as they walk up and down the stairs, that shifts from fear to something else, right? So we're probably transmuting the emotions in that moment, just as if we were looking for the emotions to shift them.
Yeah, and I think when the people have those experiences, I think the emotional intensity is even greater because of that as a result. So, I truly think you're absolutely right that it is being transmuted, because you're having a higher, more intense emotional experience when you have those kinds of experiences that completely show you, oh, hey, these are all blocks that I can let go of,
Yeah. And I think it's much easier to have healing experiences with people than it is to try and heal people.
Because you're basically holding, like you said, holding the space for them to realize that they can do that themselves, that they don't need to hold on to these things that are holding them back or preventing them from doing so.
And it might be different if you were only wanting to help one person at a time, you could maybe look for all the reasons, right? But if you want to help 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, there's no time to look for the reasons. You can't read everybody, right? But there's really no reason to read anybody, because everybody's already perfected. You just have to hold that space for them until they realize how perfect they are. Sometimes it takes a few times for them to realize how perfect they are.
Right.
I might focus on somebody today that has a migraine, and they're going to go, oh my gosh, my migraine's gone. And they might wake up tomorrow morning with a migraine again. Why? Because they probably woke up with it the morning before too. So sometimes I'll be like, well, here, message me in the morning and let's focus on it then, so I can show you that you don't need it in the morning either.
Oh, okay, nice. Because I guess you still have that perception that well, maybe it's not during this time of day, but this time of day it is. So they have to get rid of that block as well. Then.
Or if they say, well, there's times when it's 2 to 3 weeks between migraines, I'll be like, well, check in with me in 2 weeks so I can show you that in 2 weeks you don't need to have a migraine. But whatever that is, that point in our mind that releases us from things is the point we have to get past. So I helped a bunch of people that had POTS, which is a pulmonary disorder where you can't stand up for more than 30 seconds because your blood pressure spikes and your heart rate goes to 200, right? So they live their life in 30-second increments. So 35 seconds wasn't enough to show them that they were better, right? But once they stood up for a minute to 2 minutes, they never sat back down because the two realities were so far apart that they chose to stand up.
So Jen and Angie, you guys, I know you guys got probably a bunch of questions. So you guys, you want to go first, take turns, and then ask, and then have them answer, and then the other person go, and then let's get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Awesome. All right. So go ahead, Jen. I know you had a question. Then we'll switch over to Angie. I'm gonna step off camera just for a moment, but I'll be back shortly. But go ahead and have fun, you guys. I'll be right back.
All right. Cool.
Actually, you go ahead, Ange.
Wait, I do have a question. I want to
I'm
know,
not
like,
quite ready.
what are you doing to like help hold the space? Like, how are you getting these people there? Like hypnosis, meditation, counseling? Like, what is it that you do to help them understand that?
Well, if you said, I have a headache, I would say, all right, relax for a second. I probably shouldn't even say relax for a second because then people wonder if they're relaxing correctly. But really what I say doesn't necessarily matter. The only reason I say relax is just because I'm letting the person know that I'm going to be focusing on them. And again, I'm not necessarily focusing on them. If you said you had a headache, I'd say relax, and then I would just go like this. And all I'm doing is just getting out of my head and into my heart, knowing that if I'm in my heart, you can have a greater experience. Because if healing happens in the heart, then as soon as people get there, that's when the shift happens.
So like if I heal spiritually or energetically, I'm physically healing every pain, basically, you know, whatever is, because it could be so many things, like whatever you're focused on is what gets the attention. Like I'm just trying to understand.
So there are times that somebody might say, my shoulder hurts. And I'd say, okay, relax. And I would focus on them. They might say, oh, well, my shoulder still hurts. And then I might say, here, let's focus specifically on your shoulder. But I'm not focusing specifically on their shoulder. They might want me to specifically focus on their shoulder, but I don't change what I do. I do the same thing every time. I just get out of my head and into my heart. How do I know I'm out of my head? When I'm not thinking, I'm in my heart. So I might for a moment think specifically about your shoulder, but then the next moment I won't think anything. I'll just use the so we're always thinking, or we're almost always thinking. It's sometimes hard to get out of all the thinking all at once. So I might go from thinking everything to thinking shoulder to thinking nothing.
Okay, well, see, that's brings up another question, because I know when I'm not, as soon as I start thinking, my subconscious kicks in. When I'm thinking, I'm no longer present. So you're saying if I stop thinking, then that's just your subconscious kicking in. So it's just reprogramming the subconsciousness.
I would say we're even getting past the subconscious. I would say that we're getting into our heart. But since I already know what a heartfelt experience is, it's easier for me to get there. I know that people get there because when they have instant healing experiences, they're getting out of their heads and into their hearts. But it would be like if you were standing on a cliff and I was wanting you to jump into the water. It doesn't do much good if we're both on the cliff and me trying to convince you to jump. It's much better for me just to get in the water and encourage you to jump silently. So if I get out of my head and into my heart, and I'm having an experience with you, me being in my heart is enough for you to choose to get out of your head and into your heart.
Just because you're in your heart, so that's the kind of energy that is being felt.
Or that's the example that's being showcased, is a heartfelt experience.
I'm having a hard time like exactly understanding like how you're doing that, like holding that space for them to get there.
Well, because let's say that thinking is in the head and knowing is in the heart. Okay. If I already know that everybody's perfect, then all I do is get into my heart and allow that perfection to be enough for the other person to choose more perfection than what they were choosing the moment before.
And that allows them to physically heal.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of it.
That's interesting.
Is that almost
you
like
have to point out to the person that they've actually had a healing experience, because if they're not complete, so I'm trying to think of a good example. There are times when people will message me, have just watched a video, like I have a 3-minute healing video, right? They'll message me and say, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. I watched your video and my neck is better. I didn't have to point out to them. The experience was great enough that they realized their neck was better. There are times though, when I have to point out, like the woman and the sandwich. Okay. She didn't think she could eat. I had to tell her to go eat a sandwich, or else she never would have realized that she had a healing experience.
So like mind over matter.
I would say heart over everything else. When the heart shifts, when we have a change of heart, our reality shifts. The change of heart is what, when I looked back, my perception of the past shifted.
Okay.
Real quick, I have a question. I'm just curious. Did now was she like on a liquid diet or what? And is that was what her scenario was before she realized she could eat solid food?
She was down to about 3 foods that she could eat.
Okay, gotcha.
But the peanut butter and jelly sandwich was something that she hadn't been able to eat that she really wanted to eat.
Okay, so it was something that so she was basically down to like 3 foods that she believed her stomach could handle. When in reality she probably was healed a long time ago, and she just didn't realize it until that moment.
Well, she was healed 5 minutes before she took the bite.
Okay.
That was her new reality. But the sandwich is what allowed it to be permanent. Like the sandwich is what allowed it for her to know that she could do it.
Okay, so from the moment she had that, like when she started to have that experience, is when it manifested physically, and then that confirmation of being able to eat the sandwich actually cemented it in her reality by showing her that she could eat.
Yes. Just like the person that says, I can't walk up and down the stairs. After I focus on them, I tell them, okay, walk up and down the stairs. Because a lot of times, if the experience isn't great enough, we will go back to the old story. Like
we'll revert, basically.
Yeah, because there's not an experience that's greater than the old experiences, or those lower level vibration emotions of fear and shame and guilt and all that kind of stuff that have to be overcome. The stairs is what allows them to overcome those fears.
Did you have any other question? Do you have another question, Jen?
Jen hasn't asked a question yet. She hasn't got a chance. She hasn't had a chance to ask anything yet.
Okay, that's why I figured I was waiting. I was going to give her the opportunity because I know she let you go first. Would you like to go ahead and ask him your question, Jen?
Yeah, I have a question. When you talk about the rock, can that could it be like maybe perceived as the rock is holding all of this pain and all of the things that want to be changed, that once you threw it, it went away with it? Like it.
Well, the rock is just what allowed me to let it go.
Okay.
But the rock didn't take the pain, because in that moment, I realized that the pain has already been accounted for. That the pain was an experience that I no longer needed to have. I thought I needed to continue to experience pain based off of everything that had happened up to that point.
So when you first grabbed the rock, what was it that you wanted to do? Did you just want to just
I didn't
put
really
all-
want to do anything necessarily.
Okay.
I had already started experimenting with making patches that were programmed with frequencies. So I already understood that I could actually then program a rock with frequencies.
Oh wow, you're gonna have to tell us more about that sometime. That sounds like a
Wow,
fascinating
yes.
technology. I'm fascinated by that because everything is frequency, and most people don't realize it. But we're all frequency. We're vibrating at a certain frequency, which is what it's all about the frequency, people. But one of these days, we'll talk some more, Michael. I'd love to have you on to hear more about those frequency patches.
Well, I would, and I've kind of gone past that, because the frequency is just a representation of consciousness. Like there's something underlying, like energy is great, frequency is great, all it, but there's something that tells the energy what to do.
Right.
If let's just say me specifically, right? The energy was being told that I had torn labrums. So the energy was playing out an experience of torn labrums. The next moment, the labrums weren't torn. The information shifted so that the energy then did something different.
Okay.
But I wasn't changing the energy to shift the information. I shifted the information.
Okay. Now, you had this realization that you didn't need these frequency patches, but would you say that as a result of starting to work on them and create them, and then you came to that realization that you could do it yourself, basically, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I think that would be. I'd still love to have you on to talk about that, because I think that would be a great platform or medium to kind of like show other people how they can do it themselves and help them to come to that realization, because well, that's fascinating. I mean, I never heard of anything like frequency patches, so I'd be fascinated to have a little powwow with you one of these days, and maybe help our viewers kind of get to that point, because I think that would be a great learning tool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find the best learning tool is experience.
There's no substitute for experience. Absolutely. I completely agree with you there.
Yeah. And once one person's experienced it, everybody else doesn't have to experience it the same exact way, because we can piggyback on everybody else's experiences. Like there was a time when I would go into the bookstore and they would put a book in my hand and I wouldn't even open the book, and I could tell you everything that was in the book. Like right after my healing experience, like the whole world was just a whole different place. Like I had some super crazy experiences.
You were able to basically empathically, from the resonant energy in that book, figure out what it was about on a subconscious.
Energetically, I knew all the words in the book. Yeah,
right.
Something like that.
Because it's all there. Everything is energy, people. Go ahead, Jen.
It almost seems like everything, or like how we experience it, is different to which chakra is open. Maybe at the time that we are in this collective consciousness.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, if there was no resistance, we probably wouldn't even realize that there were chakras and aura and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like it's that contrast. Yeah. Yeah, he's absolutely right. If there was no resistance, we probably would not even be aware of these different tools that we or methods that we use to try and describe these things. But ultimately, even those are just tools and methods of getting us to that point, which, like you said, is ultimately not even necessary when you get to that realization, I think, right?
Well, and I personally think that we're transitioning from a time where all this stuff was important to where all that stuff isn't necessarily as important. The only thing that's important is unconditional love. Right. If you're unconditional love, there are no chakras, there is no aura, there is no It just is.
You know, I'm in complete agreement with you on that belief about. I truly believe humanity is going through a higher consciousness ascension process right now. Because if you look at everything that's happened in the last couple of years and how many people have gotten woken up, and now people are starting to look for answers elsewhere, and they're starting to realize that, oh, you know, I do, you know, this is not coming from without, it's coming from within, and I'm creating it. You know, people are slowly coming to that realization. I mean, it's I've felt the shift in energy in the last like 6 months. You know, I don't know if you have, but I know I have.
Yeah. And
I have.
it's up to us. Like I said earlier, like we've all already been perfected. It's up to us now to choose perfection. And it doesn't need to be super complicated. I think if that's like the one thing that I try and teach people the most, is like, it's actually really simple. We've been here so long that we've made things so complicated.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the time, we as human beings, we have a tendency to overthink things and make things more complicated than they really are. And I know I've done that several times myself, and only to realize that, oh, it's not that hard. It's actually a lot simpler when I think about it like this.
Yeah, I mean, some of the greatest experiences I've had with people were effortless. They said there was something wrong. I said, relax for a second. And the next moment they had a greater experience. And it is really that simple. Right? If kids were taught from the time they were, or if we were taught from the time we were kids, healing would be much simpler.
Yeah, absolutely would be. But
Right?
we're
Like,
taught all these things in schools
and
that condition us. Go ahead.
yeah. And wanting to tell us that all these different things that are wrong with us. When there's really nothing wrong with us, we just need a shift in perspective.
Absolutely. I love the word, how you use the word effortless, because that's what it really comes down to. Is if you can have effortless prosperity, that's the ultimate goal. I think effortless prosperity, effortless healing, effortless everything,
Well,
But
we
it
don't
comes
need to
down to
force healing because it's already there. We just
right.
need to allow it. Like allowing something is much easier than forcing it.
Yeah, well, effortless, right? We're allowing it instead of blocking it or resisting to it, so to speak.
And anytime we force something to be something, it usually doesn't last. Like I don't think that the universe is held together by force. I think the universe is held together by unconditional love. If somebody comes to the planets with a plan that is so perfect and with unconditional love, then the planets choose the same way we get to choose. They can choose to be planets. They could choose to be something else. But why would they choose to be anything else when that is their purpose?
Right. I think most people take for granted that with the earth we live on is a conscious entity. People, it does have a vibration, it does have a frequency, and it does have it has these, it is alive. It is as absurd as that may sound to some, it's true. It's living, entity all in of itself.
Yeah.
That's why where we have that Gaia, Gaia was one of the ancient terms they had for the earth, but that's basically what it was referring to, the Mother Earth.
Yeah. Is there anybody listening that wants me to focus on them and I can use them as an example?
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Yeah,
I deal
go
with
for it.
a lot of people that have this trauma going on with the courts and their kids being taken from them. And these people are dealing with traumatic, almost like feeling like their motherhood's being stolen from them. How would you use your technique to help people that are going through this kind of situation where their kids, they're missing out on their kids' lives? Like, this is really traumatic and people are struggling with trying to heal. I know, for instance, I'm having a hard time moving forward since they've taken my daughter. I haven't talked to her in a year. How do you utilize what you're saying to be able to heal and move past that and keep going?
Well, and that is a tough one.
That's what I'm sitting here. My brain's just twirling, thinking, well, how does this, if this is all possible, how do we utilize this and heal in this situation that so many people that are going through right now.
Yeah. Hold on. What my son's calling me from school. Let me just.
Yeah. No, go right ahead. Take your time. We got you for another hour. I mean, if you're not busy, we'd love to have, because we usually do a 2 hour. Take your time. We'll be here.
Because I would like to know, wouldn't you, Jen? Like, how do
I would too. Yes, I would.
Hold on, guys. I'm going to take a call real quick too, but go ahead and talk amongst yourself.
I am going through that same thing that you're speaking of, and it's hard for me to move forward. It's just I don't know how. I don't know.
So I'm thinking, okay, so if it's all energetic, how do you transmute this energy in this situation? Like, how could I use this in my own life and pertain it to what I'm going through to heal? Because I know a lot of people don't know how to heal from this stuff.
And a lot of the complication from that is that it never ends to heal. You know what I'm saying? Because usually, things like, say we have a scar, got a gouge or something.
But is that just the perception of it? You know what I mean? Exactly. Like how he's saying, it's just the way we're perceiving it.
Because I think we have all different realms when it comes to that. We have the physical realm, we have the spiritual realm, and then so spiritually, oh my gosh, everything's going to be chaotic. So how can that, how can we heal in all the different realms?
Right.
By letting go of our attachments.
Like once it because I think when it happens, you're stuck in the mind, and that, I don't know what kind of realm that would be called, just depending on where you are. But it just that part first, and then it's the physical, and then the spiritual, and then it just seems to kind of fall down the line. So how can we start putting things together when everything's all scattered apart?
I would say by starting to grasp how perfect we already are.
How can we do that when we're in that, where everything is so torn up and we've been torn up, spit out, throughout? Where would be a good starting point?
So if we are in an experience that is so stuck in time, it's hard for us to grasp how eternal we are or how perfected we already are. Right? Once we start to realize how perfect we already are, how perfect the plan is, how eternal we are, these things that seem very limiting in time aren't as limiting. So like if let's say somebody that lost a hand, it's really hard for somebody that lost a hand to grasp that they actually still have a hand. Because the trauma of the experience is so great, it's really hard to grasp that it could be something else. But I have a friend that's paralyzed from the waist down. I can get it to where she can kick her leg. I haven't been able to get it to where she can stand up because the experience is so great. The trauma was so great in the experience, it's hard to show her that she could actually walk.
That's it's funny you should mention that, because my mother was vax injured, and she can't walk as a result of that. And so we've been she just got out of the hospital maybe back in February, but she was in a hospital for like 8 months for flap surgeries because of negligence at a care facility. So we've been doing her physical therapy every day, and I can get her in, we got her in the wheelchair. She can kick her legs. Today we just did some core stretches, and she was able to reach her ankles. So yeah, slowly but surely. But yeah, I'm kind of like in the same boat with my mother right now, getting her back up in operating order.
But
so would you say, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So would you say that just as long as we know that we are perfect, it doesn't really matter what the outside sees us as? Would that be something? Okay.
Yeah, or if we can see
that would be from the heart. That would be from the heart, Yeah.
And if we know that there's a plan, if we know that we're eternal, like none of the stuff that happens here is really that big of a deal. We just make it a huge deal because we don't think we will have other opportunities for it to be anything different.
Okay.
Just real quick, I want to give a shout out to my fiance who was watching, Catherine. So I love you, babe. We'll talk after this show, but I promised her I'd give her a shout out. She called me right around the same time your son called you.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So Angie, you got any more questions on that, or?
No, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around the whole concept of knowing that my perfection is okay enough to not hurt by what's hurting me. You know, like,
Well, not just your perception, everybody's perception. But if everybody's perfect, then eventually we will all be having perfect experiences. It just might take some time to get there because we got to work through all this other stuff that we're stuck in at the moment.
Right. Like all these old belief systems.
It's really hard to wrap your head around something that can't be explained with your head.
Yes, it can only be explained but with your heart, or like feeling it in your heart.
We don't have the words to explain the language of the heart.
Mm.
That's why it's easier for me to show somebody how perfect they are than try to explain to them that they're perfect. So I know I use the stairs as an example a lot, but if somebody says, I can't walk up and down the stairs, it doesn't do me any good to sit there and try and tell them all the reasons that they can't. Because to them, the reasons don't matter because they've already convinced themselves the reasons are what is keeping them from walking up and down the stairs. It works better just to show them. So just
seeing is believing, basically.
in that instant, yes. Because then they have a shift in perspective. And it kind of shifts to a knowing, not a believing.
Right. Well, that believing, the seeing is believing turns into a knowing.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. It's just like when I'm in the zone, it doesn't matter as much what I say as it does me saying something. Because when you speak from your heart, it's really not what you're saying. People aren't picking up on the words, they're picking up on the heartfelt experience.
And the energy.
Yeah. Or the consciousness or the perfection. Yes.
Yeah, there's so much oh well, I just kind of like want to go into a little bit, just I want to give our viewers an example of perception, because I wanted to kind of tie into how perception ties, is having that perceptual awareness of knowing that your perception is a choice, and how you can utilize that conscious awareness to start to create and choose to optimize your joy and minimize your stress as a result, and bring so much more manifestation of things into your life. So like one of the things that I learned through this higher consciousness experience that I went was that everything's connected, but more importantly, how we perceive any given situation is a choice. I'm going to give you a classic, well, I don't know if it's a classic example. It's a good example that worked for me. It was in a book that I read a while back, like years ago, but it describes, okay, so you have a shoe salesman goes into a town and sees that everybody's barefoot. So he thinks, oh, well, nobody needs shoes, so I might as well move on to the next town and try and sell some there. Whereas, in another scenario, he goes in and he sees everybody's barefoot. Oh, everybody needs shoes. And it sells all his shoes, sells them out. But that's one, really simple example of a scenario that people can use as an analogy to the way you look at any given situation. It's a choice. Once you realize that it's a choice, you can optimize your experience of your joy or prosperity and minimize any negative or stressful situations. And so that's from what I've learned. That's having that awareness is one of the most important critical factors in moving to that next step.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is kind of all next level stuff, right? Like this is a little bit out there. But if
we're pioneering a new field, man, that's what we're doing.
If you say, I have a headache, your perception is that you have a headache and you don't think you have any other choices. Because if you thought you had the choice of not having a headache, you would probably, and I say probably because sometimes people's stories are so extreme that that's what they continue to choose. But you don't realize that you have a different choice. But it's different than knowing you have a headache, because you actually don't have a headache. Your perception is that your head hurts. When I focus on somebody and I get out of my head and into my heart, I'm creating more options for them, because in that moment when they get out of their head and into their heart is the moment they start to grasp that, oh, wait a second, maybe I do have more choices. Right? Sometimes then I have to point out, well, how does your head feel now? It might go from, let's say, I said, oh, on a scale from 1 to 10, what's your pain level? You might say a 10. And then I focus on you. And then you might say it's a 7. When really, it never goes from a 10 to 7. It always goes from a 10 to a 0. 7 is all that your perception can grasp in that moment. Then I might focus on you again and then ask you, and you might say it's a 3 and then a 0. When it always goes from a 10 to a 0 to a 7, or a 10 to a 0 to 3, or 10 to a 0 to whatever it is the perception can allow in that moment. But perception is different than knowing, because perception is just based off of what we are perceiving in the moment. When in reality, we are all already perfected. Once you get into that knowing,
yeah,
then there are no headaches.
Right. You know, and I think one of the things that, like, I think helped me to learn to get to that point and to that knowing space was having that realization about perception. Because once you start to realize that your perception of any given situation is a choice, then you can start to actually start to do the internal work to come to that realization that, oh, it becomes a knowing because of that realization. It gets you to that point where you have that knowing. For me, at least, that's how it happened.
I was addicted to drugs for 10 years, meth for the last 8. I went to prison for manufacturing. I've had to stop some pretty difficult things. As soon as I made the choice to change is when I no longer had the desire to use.
Right? So it all comes down to that choice again, that having that personal choice. And once you make that decision in your mind, then you can move on to that new path.
When I was trying to be clean, I was never able to stay clean. Whether I went to jail or rehab or any of it, none of it mattered. Right? As soon as I realized I had the choice is when everything shifted. But I took sleeping medication for 18 years that I had to work off of. I took Adderall for 18 years that I had to stop. Like, I've had to step out of some pretty difficult things that I created for myself. Right? But even after my healing experience, it still took me 2 years to stop taking sleeping medication, because I still didn't see the choice in that situation. I thought because of doing it for 18 years, there wasn't a choice for me to do something differently. So it took me 3 months of sleeping in the bathtub, because that's the only place that I could sleep, to get off of sleeping medication.
Okay.
Right. But I also started tapering down, thinking that's the only option I had, when tapering is the same as stopping. Eventually, I just had to make the choice. And then I had to work through whatever came after that.
Right. We're working through all the after effects of that, and and the withdrawal from the sleeping medication. I myself am on a sleeping medication to help me sleep at night. I don't know, maybe you were on the same one, Seroquel.
Oh, I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they had me on. So I'm like, it's funny you should say it, because, like, I'm in a similar boat right now with that. So I'm like, how do you break that cycle? That's one of the things that I've been trying to, like, wrap my head around, is how do you get from here to here?
Just by getting there.
Yep.
Yeah. And when we participate at certain levels for a certain amount of times, it's sometimes hard to grasp that it could be instant, because we hold ourselves accountable for all the choices that we made. Right. So even though I realized and I knew that healing could be instant, it was hard for me to have an instant experience around sleeping medication because I participated with it for so long at a certain level.
Right.
Like every night it was about sleeping. Every day it was about wondering if I was going to sleep that night. Right? But it's no different than when we get out of our head and into our hearts, we have greater experiences. But when we're worried about sleeping tonight, when tonight hasn't even happened yet, we're creating an experience before the experience.
And I think when we do that, we manifest it as a result of doing that. So like, you're absolutely right. Then we got to live in the moment and focus on the here and now. And because when we can do that and stop worrying about things that haven't happened yet, then we can let go of the expectations and the roadblocks that prevent us from coming to these experiences and realizations, I think, right?
And the greatest of manifestors are the greatest of manifestors, regardless of what they're manifesting. Like unhealthy people are probably great manifestors. They just don't see a choice to manifest anything other than their unhealthiness.
You make a valid point there because it works both ways. We think that everything happening to us it's coming from outside of us, but it's really not. And we don't realize that by having those perceptions and those beliefs that we're unhealthy, we're it manifests just the same as it does, for the negative and the positive. It absolutely does.
That's why I have to be careful, because if I get down, I can get way down because it seems overwhelming. But as soon as it starts to seem overwhelming and I start to feed into that manifestation of that overwhelmingness, it becomes a lot.
It does. And I know from my own personal experience, when I'm down and out and depressed, I can get pretty low too, and like go from one extreme to the other. So I totally know where you're coming from. I'm usually what I would call the eternal optimist, but every now and then when I'm having a rough one, I'll turn into a slight pessimist or even nihilist for a day.
Yeah.
And trying to break that is like, sometimes it can be easy.
Yeah, but I mean, we're great manifestors.
We absolutely are.
It's like if there's a room of negative people, you have to step into that room knowing that your positivity is enough for them to choose differently, but not to get wrapped up into their choice. It doesn't do much good to think that you need to protect yourself from the negativity. Because when you walk into the room protecting yourself from the negativity, you're becoming the negativity.
Right.
If you walk into the room knowing that your positivity is enough, it doesn't have an influence over you. And it allows the people to choose how they want to be. Right. We're all examples of possibility for people.
So whether we want to... Oh, go ahead.
Whether we choose to be or not, we're all examples.
One of our viewers says PTSD is hell. How would you recommend somebody? How could somebody with really bad PTSD from service in the military or
overcome? I would say that living in the past is hell, right? Because you're replaying the same experiences over and over again. So if it was hell once, it's going to continue to be hell. If you had a traumatic experience 10 years ago and you play it in your head, it's as if you're playing it over, right? So those experiences repeat themselves and repeat themselves and repeat themselves. And then we get stuck in that cycle. In the present moment, there is no PTSD.
How would you say one would go about trying to break that cycle of having those replays in those visitations that put them in that back there where that PTSD occurred,
yeah, that that's a tough one. What I would do usually is I would focus on them and see if I can create a heartfelt experience so they have some idea of what it feels like to be out of their head and into their heart. So then they know where to get back to. Like, I know how to get into my heart because I've already been there. It's hard to explain to somebody how to get into their heart without having them have a heartfelt experience.
Right.
But also too, anytime that stuff starts to pop up, you have to learn just to let it go.
Okay. So basically you have to learn to let it go. And I know like for a lot of people, like PTSD is, for one of my buddies who served, it comes into sleep, like it's out of nowhere sometimes, and just kind of how do you break that cycle? It's kind of like, because like sometimes it happens at the the strangest moments from
Well, I would say by shifting your awareness and knowing that you have a choice.
okay.
But it's really tough to tell people they have a choice when they don't think they have a choice.
Right.
It offends people sometimes when I tell them they have a choice when they don't think that they have one. Like I've helped a bunch of people with, let's say, fibromyalgia.
Mm-hmm.
I've posted stuff in fibromyalgia groups and I've been attacked because they don't think they have a choice. So if somebody comes and tells them that they can be better, people have to be willing to know that they have a choice. But what it does, once you realize you have a choice, it allows you the space to change it. Just like we're not a victim to our genes. It's already been proven that genes are influenced by the environment, that we can upregulate and downregulate genes by the environment.
Well, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And from this perspective, like, when we adapt to a certain environment, our body adapts as well. And over time, over generations, we see, like certain species of animals that have adapted to certain, regions on the earth that have migrated from one to the other, and then they adapt. And you see that changes in the DNA for generations. I totally believe that's accurate.
Yeah. There was a woman in 1986 that had multiple personalities. She only had cancer in one personality. As soon as her personality shifted, they could MRI her and she no longer had cancer in that other personality. That's how complete things can shift. But it takes a 100% shift in perspective to change something like that.
Right. Yeah. How would you say somebody that was that has had a lot of like brainwashing and programming that's gone through them, like could get out of, like, break that cycle? Because that's also another aspect of things that some people have been victims of as well.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are tough to get over. I mean, if I hadn't gone out and started helping people, I could have gone back to where I was. Right? Sometimes the easiest way to help myself is to help other people.
Okay.
But to help other people by being an example of possibility, not trying to change people.
Gotcha.
Right? And some people's experiences have been really difficult. That's why sometimes it's hard to step out of the past and into the greater experience.
Absolutely. I would say, now I'm no expert in PTSD, by the way, but I would recommend it just from my own perspective. I think one of the first things you can do to break that cycle is first be aware of it, acknowledge it, but don't realize that you don't have to let it affect you in such a drastic negative way. You can consciously acknowledge it and then let it go. It may take time to you may have to gradually start realizing that over time, but you'll get there. I think that's one of the first things that we can do is you can mitigate it to some degree. I would say, not entirely, but like that will take time, but that's my perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, anything can shift, everything can shift. Right? If, just like my friend that's paralyzed, she might not be the first. It might take other people to have instant healing experiences from that to then realize that she could stand up and walk. Right? Like if people recognized miracles every day, it would be easier for people to have miracle experiences. If people had instant healing experiences every day, it becomes easier for more people to have instant healing experiences. Right?
Yeah, it's like the 100th monkey syndrome, right?
What's that?
Oh,
the monkey. Yes.
Unmute yourself, Daddy.
Yeah, the 100 monkey theory.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if I had 1,000 people to focus on other people, we could probably generate greater experiences than I could on my own.
same concept as what I was talking about with the podcast, with,
Oh
meditation.
yeah, the one you're doing for the boxing, what your plan was for that one? Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
The same concept.
Go ahead, tell Michael what your plan was. What because I think that's I totally valid. I think that we have more power when we collectively manifest or meditate on a certain intent. We can collectively make it happen. I mean,
Right.
this is
And
shown in
so
certain
the intent
scientific
being to
experiments before.
free our children from this agenda that they have so many people caught up in and trafficking our kids.
Yeah. The thing with the mass meditations and the group meditations is you have to be coming at it from a heartfelt space for it to be effective.
Right.
Just like a prayer. If I say a prayer for somebody today, that prayer is holding space and time. But if I do something tomorrow that is counterproductive to that prayer, it's no longer held in space and time.
Well, I mean, isn't that just the point? We should all be coming from the heart space anyway.
Yeah,
But when
definitely
you
should
tend to
be.
just live that way, like that's just how I try to tend to live. But
Yes.
it's still this.
Yeah, I mean, it is really hard to
I
come
must
from
be
the
an
heart
asshole to
space
myself, I don't know.
when things are happening outside of us that we feel so strongly that we want to change. But it's really hard to be in your heart and also try and force change, because they're opposite.
Can't force it.
No, you just have to hold that space, knowing that your example is enough that can influence change. And really, that's all healing is. It's just an example of possibility for people. James, if you knew you could fly, it would work that way. You can't believe you can fly. You have to know you can fly. Because if you don't know you can fly, you're going to question it the entire time before you jump. No different than Jesus walked on water. Peter believed he could walk on water. And then all of a sudden he realized that believing wasn't enough, because when the storm came, he started to sink. Moses knew the sea was going to part because he didn't flinch. He didn't waver. He just walked across. Right? Just like if I'm wanting to bend a spoon, let's say, I have to know that the spoon is already bent. But I also have to not react when the spoon starts to bend. And that is the most difficult thing, because our mind wants to instantly go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And as soon as we say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening, is usually the moment that it stops happening.
We don't even think about it, like the words that we use a lot of the time, but you're absolutely right. By actually saying those words or thinking those words, oh, I can't believe this is actually happening, we're in effect preventing it from happening further because of that. James said you have to realize there is no spoon.
Right. There's no spoon, and there's every degree of bend in the spoon. Right. We're just holding it physically. Yeah. But the hardest part is when reality shifts to that point, is the hardest part to hold on to, because we don't necessarily want things to shift like that. Because if that's possible, then what else is possible?
Right. It can be overwhelming when you come to that realization. You're like, oh, whoa, am I sure I want to have all this? I'm not so sure I'm ready for this. Is that we revert back to that mind space. Go ahead.
Unlimiting possibilities is sometimes a difficult place to be, because all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, like if this is possible, then this is possible, then this is possible. Yeah, it is really difficult. Like, I don't really go back and dwell on all the healing experiences that I've had with people, because sometimes when I start thinking about all the experiences, I'm like, this is crazy stuff. Like, I'll even think it's crazy.
Yeah, I know you. And that's when you start to have that self-doubt too. That also
Yeah.
gets you back into those old thinking patterns that revert, that make you revert to your old expectation of reality.
And life is always happening. Right? Like, if, let's say I didn't have kids, it might be easier for me to stay in my heart, right? Kids can challenge you from staying in your heart, because as soon as they do something, And we want to react because either we feel like, well, they need to be doing something different, or that's not going to benefit them, or that's going to hurt them long term, or whatever, right? It's really hard to hold that space. Just like if my son falls off his bike and cuts his knee, it's really hard in that moment to have an instant healing experience with him, because all he is worried about is his knee hurting, right? And then if I get wrapped up into his pain, then that's all I'm worried about is his knee hurting. And I just want it to stop. And it's hard to hold the space when you want something to stop for somebody.
They have to be able to, you have to be able to hold the space to have, you have to not have that want personally from your own, but they have to have it from their own heart space, basically. And you have to learn to hold that space for them to have that experience.
Yeah.
Jen, are you still there? There she is.
Oh, I'm here. I'm
You want to
just
have
listening.
you have any input you want to put in your 2 cents on that, or any more questions?
No, I don't think so. Not right now.
Well, what did you think of what we just said, basically, about the whole what we just talked about? You've been MIA for a minute. I don't know if you were listening. I'm sure you were, though.
Oh, I was listening. Just said, how can we go from our head to our heart if everything around us is all about our head? You know,
Good question.
It's sometimes difficult. That's why I said it's easier for me to get out of my head sometimes helping somebody else out, because it plays to my strengths. I'm highly empathic. I want to help people, right? That's part of who I am. So if somebody comes to me and says my head hurts, I can get out of my head momentarily to allow them to have a greater experience. That doesn't mean that I stay out of my head and in my heart, because like I just said a minute ago, if my kids are yelling and screaming and there's stuff going on and I've got, other stuff that I have to deal with, it's hard to hold that space. But I know that I can do it in brief moments to help other people. So then that means that I know I can do it in moments to help myself if I need to. But I practice more like of an active meditation than just a sitting around and try and meditate.
So it's knowing that you're meditating instead of trying to meditate, but you're right. Like you said, like it's you say you put yourself, take yourself out of your head momentarily to help that other person, have that experience. But like you said, like depending upon what's going on in your own, like if your kids are screaming, whatever, you're gonna have it's all about where you're able to how you can hold that space, and you're like you said, we're all only human, but we're all working towards that greater experience, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I teach an online class on how to heal yourself and how to help others heal. And we meet 5 days a week for an hour. So
do you have a link for our viewers? I'd love to put that in the description for them, and any others that you might have.
Most people just contact me on Facebook and I give them the details.
Okay.
But in my class, I'm speaking from my heart. So for an hour a day, I know that I'm getting out of my head and into my heart and having heartfelt experiences with people. So I always have that to fall back on. And I have people that message me all day long that want me to focus on them. So I'm constantly getting out of my head and into my heart. So in those situations, it's much easier. That's why sometimes it's easier to teach somebody how to help somebody else, and then it benefits them, than it is to teach them to sit around and try and help themselves.
Okay, yeah.
Is that maybe why sometimes we heal more when we help others heal?
Well, I would say that we probably heal more, yes, when we help others heal. Because really, if everybody's already healed, then when we're helping somebody else, we're just having a heartfelt experience with them. And then their perfection is presenting itself, which allows us to feel more perfect about ourselves.
Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense. No, that makes perfect sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. totally. It was
Want me
gave
to put
me a
any
clear
input
perception.
in Angie for us?
Oh, no, I just think I'm an asshole to myself because I know all this stuff, yet I'm still experiencing all the bullshit that I'm experiencing. So I'm just like, I'm such an asshole to my own self because I know how to get out of my head into my heart. I know how to manifest. I know how to do all these things, yet I couldn't stop the experience that I'm having now. And I'm struggling to even change it at this point. So it's, kind of frustrating because I know everything that you're saying. It's not that I believe in this stuff. I know what you're saying, yet I'm still going through this experience.
Well, I think deep down inside, we all know that we're perfect. Then when things happen in our lives that don't align with perfection, we then start to question our own selves. Right? Or then when our outside experiences don't match up with our inside perception, right? Then we start to even question ourselves. And then it is much harder to get into those spaces. And then we're like, well, why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? Right? Or all that self-doubt creeps in. And then, yes, it makes it much more difficult. And some people have experiences that are more difficult than others.
Yeah, there's like everybody's has their own levels of trauma that they've gone through, and of course, it's going to be harder for some people to break free of that. But the important thing I think for people to realize is that you can. You have to let go of that how things affect you negatively. Could be just be aware of them and acknowledge it, but don't let it affect you in a negative light or negative manner. Don't let it drag you down. Only focus on what will uplift you, so to speak, and then that ties into what I have been saying before about optimizing your joy and minimizing your stress.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why I'm able to help is I've experienced some pretty crappy stuff in my life. Right? Like I was addicted to drugs for 10 years. I spent 2 years in prison. I've been kidnapped. I've been shot at. I've been through 2 divorces, like all this stuff. Right? So I have enough compassion that I don't want other people to have to experience things that aren't the best.
Right. No, you have that you have that understanding and awareness of that other extreme of how traumatizing these can be, and then as a result you're able to overcome and not want to see that for others and help others in that regard because you have that experience.
But it also gives purpose to all of it. Whereas 8 years ago, it was hard for me to see the purpose in any of it. I just saw that I was missing out on things, not that I was actually benefiting from the experiences.
Oh yeah, no, totally. And it's funny how you later down the road you look back and you're like, oh, well, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have the insight and the wisdom that I have now. So that's the point where you begin to realize, oh, that was the purpose.
Right. And like even back in my addiction, I could dance all night long. So in 2007, when I decided to write a book about my addiction and go on a 12,000-mile bicycle ride around the United States, I knew that I could ride my bike every day, all day, because I knew that I was the one doing it. Whether it was drug-induced or not, my body was still physically doing it. So I knew that I was capable of doing it. Right. But like I said, everything that happened up until my major healing experience, all was part of my healing experience. Right? If everything didn't happen the way that it happened, I wouldn't have had that great experience. And then I wouldn't be able to help people the way that I do now.
Right. Like it's funny because I don't have any regrets either. Like, maybe when I was younger, when I was going through all that, yeah, maybe at the time. But then looking back, I'm realizing that, oh, I wouldn't be the man that I am today without my past experiences. Every single one of those experiences contributed to me becoming the man that I am today. And if I take one of those threads out, the whole thing unravels. And so, I think you're absolutely right there. We would not be the people we are today if we had not gone through what we went through to get here.
Yeah.
I have a question, or maybe somebody
Go ahead, Jen.
Is it okay? We have to. How can we, when we're in the moment of this in our head, how can we convince, or maybe not convince, that we have more than one option when we're stuck in that moment of time that you say? How
Yeah.
What are some, is there any kind of like techniques or anything that, maybe we can train ourselves to be able to know that we're not, hey, we're not stuck here. There's a few different options for us.
Well, probably to start knowing that you have options before the experience.
Okay.
Because when we're in it, we're pretty stuck in it. But just like
Okay.
if you go to a hypnotist, they're going to take you back to a time before an event and give you some options so that then when they bring you back past the event, you have options in case it happens.
Okay.
But just like if, trying to think of a good example, somebody that can't stop smoking, let's say, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but if they go to a hypnotist, they're going to take them back to a point before they smoked. Because the person that can't stop smoking doesn't think they have a choice to stop. Right?
Right.
So they're going to take them back to that place where when they didn't smoke and give them that
And then
perspective back.
they create the options there so that then when you bring them back in time to the present moment, they have those options that they already came up with. Just in the moment, they don't think they have any options because their perception is they have to keep doing something.
Okay. Is that almost like maybe they're in an instinct to, it's a fight or flight response, maybe?
Probably. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
so we're transitioning from a time of cause and effect to causing an effect.
Okay.
We are so stuck in cause and effect. We think that if something happens, that then something else has to happen. Or A plus B is always C. When torn labrums and bilateral impingements didn't mean that I had to continue to have them. In that moment, I stepped out of cause and effect and caused an effect. I went from having something because of something else to being perfected again.
James says, oh, go ahead.
Well, and it's like with let's use my knee as an example. I've had 7 right knee surgeries. It's sometimes hard when I'm running and I start to feel knee pain to step outside of that, because it's hard not to go back to, oh, well, the doctor said not to run because you've had 7 knee surgeries. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's pretty easy to get wrapped back up into cause and effect.
Right, because you've already been in that headspace and you're used to it already.
Right. So it sometimes takes me a little bit of time to work through my knee pain and to let it go because I've already experienced it. And I blamed my knee for everything that happened in my life. I injured my knee when I was 15. I thought my life was over. I started drinking. I couldn't stop. I started using drugs, missed out on my scholarships for sports, didn't go to college, went to all that stuff I blame my knee for. Right?
James says, think outside the box, take yourself out of the equation in your head and see the big picture.
Yeah. Well, and the big picture is we're already all perfected, that we are eternal beings, that this is just the tiniest of experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about growth. And I mean, this is, life is a learning experience, and, we're evolving and we're growing, not just physically, but, and mentally, emotionally, but spiritually as well. I mean, it's what life's all about, and everything we go through and everything we experience has this purpose. And because, where we are today is a result of those experiences. And without that, we would not be who we are, and we would not be where we're at, I think. And I think that's one of the most blessings, the biggest blessings that I've come when I come to that realization that everything has its purpose, and that, and as a result of that, I can see, okay, this is why this happened. It's okay that happened, even though I didn't want it to happen at the time. It happened because it led me to where I am today, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Because, I think whether or not I think we have to learn to shift our perspective and let go of things that, okay, one of the biggest problems I've seen with my certain members of my family, there's a lot of they don't feel worthy, they have self-doubt, they don't feel like they deserve this or that, And see, that's one of the things that we have, we have to break ourselves. You have to realize that you do deserve to be happy. You do deserve all the great things in life. You have to stop beating yourself up and putting yourself down internally, so that you can come to that perspective that, yes, I am worthy of this, or having this experience. And then because one of the biggest hindrances is that self-doubt and that self-blame and that self-loathing, where we start to take ourselves down because we have so many regrets. And when we learn to let go of that and acknowledge that, hey, I don't have to feel that way, there's a better path, that's a big hiccup, I know, for some people that I know, that I still see them trying to get past and growing. But it's one of the biggest pieces of insight I could probably give people that might be having issues trying to get to that point, is you got to learn to stop doubting yourself, stop thinking that you don't deserve to have good things, to stop thinking that you're not worthy, so to speak, and come to that realization, because that will get at the core of a lot of those roadblocks.
Well, everybody's worthy of a second chance, and they're unlimited. Like I said before, like, we're the ones that prevent ourselves from having the greatest of experiences because, again, we don't think that we're worthy of it because we know our stories.
We are our worst critic.
Yes, always.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
That's why sometimes it's easier to show somebody how to go help somebody else, because then they feel worthy of the experience themselves, when really they're worthy of the experience themselves, regardless of if they help somebody else.
Right. But that helps them come to that realization from
Yes.
that experience of helping another.
And that's part of the reason that we're here, is to help other people. Like I said, if we were meant to be by ourselves, we'd be having our own experience by ourselves somewhere.
We'd have our own planet. That's great.
Right? That'd be awfully lonely, wouldn't it?
Yes. I'd be bored.
Yeah.
Well, we got about another 13 minutes to go. Man, it's been great having you on. And we're
Wow,
really good show. We've had a good solid stream of live viewers throughout the whole thing. So that's great. That's always good.
And this is and I'm even more comfortable to come on camera. So
yeah, you are, Jen.
I'm
You're getting
just
over your
really
camera
relaxing.
shyness.
Well, no, I mean, it's just great. Yeah. So
Do you have a website where people can contact you? Or
It's probably best just that I'm working on my website right now. I have one, I got to update it. But if you can contact me on Facebook.
Do I have permission to put your link in there for the
Yep,
viewers if they want to reach out to you? Okay.
Yeah, just Mikael Luman on Facebook. Yeah.
And that's spelled Mikael.
Yes, Luman.
and you
Got
can
it.
help anybody anywhere. They don't have to be local. Like,
I haven't helped people locally in a long time. I mean, I do every once in a while, but yes, most of the people I help are all over the world.
okay.
Yeah. It is actually sometimes easier not in person.
yes, because then you don't have that preconception of they can't walk or whatever, or something. You just
Like the one person that was in a
Right.
wheelchair for 11 years that just stood up and walked, I didn't know she was in a wheelchair. This
right.
was right in the beginning, and I was posting stuff on different groups in Facebook, and I was focusing on like 5 or people at a time, and I was just doing it through Messenger. So I just said, relax. She said her legs hurt. I said, relax. I focused on her, and then she said, OMG, ... I'm walking for the first time in 11 years.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Had I seen her in the wheelchair, it might have been different.
Right.
Because you would have had that expectation or that perspective of, and that would have been ingrained in your mind.
I would have thought that maybe it wouldn't be possible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It would bring that doubt into the equation that is critical to not have.
Right. So for me, that's probably the biggest thing that I have to let go of all the time, is just knowing that people are already perfected and that not getting too wrapped up into their story, because stories are pretty extreme.
Yeah.
And some stories are extremely extreme. So when people come to me and ask for help, I will allow them to share their experience. But at a certain point, that doesn't necessarily matter. Right? Because like I've been saying, like second chances don't care what the story is. Miracles don't care what the story is. And to people, the only thing that matters is the greater experience. So unless you can show them that regardless of what they're saying, reality can be different than that, it's not all that effective. That's why, like what you said earlier, like seeing is believing. Like if somebody says, I can't walk up and down the stairs, show them that they can.
And then they'll know that they can once they see that they can.
Right. And then it's not a thinking thing anymore. It's a knowing thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I know even if it's not like fully walking, for example, you just the little increments, the little steps, the little, the progress that you make, that in and of itself can be enough to keep you pushing forward until you get to that point. And it may take time, but the important thing is that you're making the progress and you're seeing the results through that change in your perspective and awareness.
Yeah. Well, you have to shift your baseline, or people will go back. Like if the little steps usually aren't necessarily enough to break somebody out of a bad experience, because even if they take a slight step forward, their thinking will pull them back to where they were. That's why I found that.
I'm sorry, the experience won't be big enough. Is that right? Like that one step would not be big enough for them. They want the full step.
Regardless of what they want,
right?
What allows them to get out of the past is a great enough experience.
Okay.
So if somebody says, I don't have money, and $1 drops from the ceiling, it's probably not going to change their story. If $1 million drops from the ceiling, they're probably going to change their story.
Right.
Because you cannot be in the same space. Just like if somebody says, I can't walk up and down the stairs, and I show them that they can do one step might not be enough for them to change their story. And they might sit back down. And then the next time they might do one step and then sit back down. But eventually they'll convince themselves that one step isn't even walking. If I show them 10 steps, they usually don't sit back down. Because why would they need to? Because the two stories are so opposite. One, I can't walk up and down the stairs. One, I just did to the top and back. And usually they choose to continue to walking up and down the steps.
So it's reaching that threshold of what your experience or what your experience, that threshold where you have a powerful and impactful enough experience. Once it crosses that threshold of your expectation or your belief, then you can have that knowing, but it has to pass that certain threshold of your doubt and your expectation.
Yeah. So if somebody's standing on the starting line, let's say of a 100-yard race, it doesn't do any good to run it for them, because then the next time they're going to be standing at the starting line too. Everybody has a different place to where they know they can finish. Some people, it might be one step and then they just go. Some people, they might have to get to the 50-yard line and then they just keep going. But when the experience is great enough, they no longer have any doubt that they can do it. They just are doing it.
Yeah, I know it's that self-doubt, and like you said, everybody's got their own where their threshold, so to speak. Everybody is different. Everybody has it's different for everybody because we all have different life experiences and and beliefs and upbringings and expectations. But I think you're absolutely right. We have to be mindful. There is no one fits all. It's everybody's a little different, but once you realize where your threshold is and you can start pushing past that and start having those realizations and experiences, I think that's the critical thing. The most important thing for people to realize is that they can do it. They have to just, a big part of it is, when you doubt, you don't take the time. Don't, like, for example, that one lady that couldn't eat that didn't think she could eat the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Because she had that belief, she never tried. And because she never tried, she never found out that she could. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Or her experiences only lined up with her thinking. And then when she had a heartfelt experience, it was greater than all the thinking. Yeah. Because her thinking was she couldn't eat food. That's why she was down to 3 foods that she could eat. And even those 3 foods sometimes upset her stomach. So I showed her a different reality. And then she chose that that was enough, that she was just going to continue to eat regardless. It's no different than if I focus on somebody, let's say their back hurts. And if I've had it where, let's say somebody has a doctor's appointment next week, you know that it's complete when they cancel the doctor's appointment. Because why would you go to the doctor if you knew your back was better? Sometimes we seek validation even though we've had a greater experience. I didn't need the doctor to tell me my hips and my back were better because I was paddleboarding across the Columbia River, because the two were so opposite. Right. Just like I had an 18-year-old boy that was scheduled to have his ankle operated on the next Wednesday because he tore ligaments. I focused on him. He went and played soccer. The only reason he went to the doctor is because his mom made him go, not because he wanted to go, because soccer to him was enough to show him that his ankle was better. And when he went to the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with your ankle. I don't know what the MRI was showing. It must have been an old injury or something.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That's fascinating.
I was gonna say fascinating too, but I ended up using the word awesome. But yeah.
Yeah, but to him,
I knew what you were thinking.
Experience that the MRI meant nothing to him. Whereas somebody that was 50 that had experiences with, let's say, MRIs, that MRI might have been the truth to them. More truth than the experience of playing soccer. To him, playing soccer was the greatest of experiences.
Because he knew from playing that it was nothing wrong with it. Right.
Like he had to hold on to one or the other. Is the MRI correct, or is me playing soccer correct? And he chose to play soccer.
Because he had 2 choices. So he chose the greater experience.
Right. Yeah.
It's been great having you on, Michael. We should definitely do this again sometime. I think you got a lot of insight and valuable knowledge to bring to the table, because it's definitely right up there in line with like some of my own experiences. Yeah. And man, that was a great show. 2 full hours we got. We should probably wrap it up for everybody, but thank you so much for jumping on and showing up for our show. We'd love to have you back sometime soon, Em, in the near future. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. This has been great.
Yeah, and if people want to contact me, you can just message me on Messenger, and I respond to messages right away.
Awesome. Yeah, he does. He's really, really quick with that. I noticed.
When I clicked on there, I didn't quite respond, or like send a message. It said respond quickly. So even Messenger like has recognized you respond quickly. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that feature they have.
Awesome.
So.
Nice.
Wow, it's been great. Awesome.
Cool.
Definitely. Thank you so much again, Michael. We'll be in touch and probably have you back on in the very near future, because this is I love having these little powwows and these conversations, because I think these are critical things for people to hear about and understand, to be able to get past their barriers, so to speak.
And sometimes it's better when I have somebody on that I can focus on and show people like really how simple it is.
Maybe we should do that for next time we have you on. I think that would be great.
Yeah, we can do that.
That would be awesome. That way we can show people.
Yeah.
Hey, there you are, Dottie.
Sorry.
We're about to wrap it up, but it was a great show, and we were definitely we're thinking about having back on for and have a person he could focus his intent on to show our viewers exactly how.
I think that's a good idea, because I think so might help people grasp the concept a little bit easier.
Definitely.
And how it would be to show others and show everybody else how to do it, not tell them how to do it, to show them how to do it.
That's a great idea, you guys.
Please come back, Michael.
I'll come back anytime.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay,
we'll do.
Cool.
Definitely. We will definitely have you back soon, because I think that would be a great show and a great tool to help people see what we're talking about, because there's so much truth in what you're saying, and I, from my own personal experience with perception and what I realized with my higher consciousness experience, I think that we could really truly like help a lot of people in that regard and help them to change.
it becomes more real when you see it happen with people.
Mhm.
It does.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
'Cause
All right.
seeing is
All right. Thank you,
believing.
everybody. We had a great show. Don't forget to subscribe to all our pages and channels. They're in the description, and check out the Sacred Louisa Bonfire store. We have cups, water bottles, shirts, everything. Dottie's put together quite a bit of a selection for you guys, and she has a whole bunch of other stuff she's working on for some of the other shows. So she's even got a mug for the new The Box podcast that she's going to be doing next week.
Awesome.
Yay,
All
I
right.
need to order my cup.
All right, everybody. Great show. We'll see you guys all soon. Next week on Wednesday. I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about yet, but I'll have something posted soon.
Cool.
Good night, everybody.
Okay.